Have you ever wondered where history's biggest secret actually gets found? Not in a museum, not in some palace vault, in a pile of trash. Inside a synagogue in Cairo, there was a dark windowless room where people threw away their old useless papers for 800 years. And hidden inside that dark room was a story of a Jewish merchant and an Indian worker who 800 years ago, without a single passport, without a single border, built a shared life together. I read this story in a book and it made me question something I had never really questioned before. Are we actually becoming more civilized, or are we losing something we don't even realize we have lost? Hey everyone, I'm Rahul, and today we are talking about Amitav Ghosh in an antique land. If you're new here in this channel, this is a channel where I dig deep dive into books, not just summaries, but what a book actually teaches us about ourselves and about the world we live in. And this isn't just a book review. This is a story that genuinely disturbed me in the best possible way. So let's get into it. This is the book of Amitav Ghosh in an antique land, and it refuses to fit into any clean category. It's part of anthropology, part medieval detective story, part philosophical manifesto, and when I read it, it genuinely challenged how I see history, religion, and my own identity. If you're anything like me, you're probably exhausted by the constant division you see on your news feed. It feels like very culture, very country is locked in some endless, inevitable clash. But Ghosh does something brilliant here. He takes us on the two parallel journey that completely shatter the narrative. On one side, we follow Ghosh himself in the 1980s, a young Indian researcher living in a rural Egyptian village, trying to understand a culture completely different from his own. On the other side, he takes us back to the 11th century, chasing the ghost of an Indian worker named Boma and his partner, a Jewish merchant named Abraham ben Yezu. Let's start with medieval world Ghosh uncovers. And okay, I want you to forget everything you learned in the school about the medieval ages. Forget that Eurocentric imagery, nights, plagues, and dark isolation. Instead, picture the Indian Ocean in the year 1130. This ocean was massive, pulsing highway of humanity. But here's the detail that genuinely blew my mind. It was completely unmilitarized at that time. For centuries, ships from Egypt, East Africa, Yemen, and India crossed these waters without carrying a single naval weapon. Imagine. No empire claimed the water. No king demanded a passport. Trade wasn't driven by conquest. It was built on mutual trust. And at the center of this world, Ghosh finds a beautifully ordinary relationship. Through the letters found in a Cairo synagogue, he reconstructs the life of Ben Yizu, a Jewish merchant born in Tunisia, who moved to Cairo, then Yemen, and finally settled on the southwest coast of India in Mangalore. While living in India, he doesn't colonize, he doesn't isolate himself in some enclave. He integrates, he marries a local woman, builds a bronze factory, and hires an Indian assistant named Boma. In the official Western archives, Boma is recorded simply as a slave. But the deeper I got into Gosh's analysis, the clearer it became. This wasn't the brutal, dehumanizing chattel slavery we would later see in the transatlantic trade, actually. Boma was a business partner. He managed Penyuzu's trading ship, looked after his household, and wrote letters checking on his health. They were bound together by choice, by commerce, and by mutual respect. A Jew from North Africa and a worker from India building a shared life in a language they both learned together, Judeo-Arabic. Think about that for a second. This wasn't some elite cosmopolitanism born in a Western university. This was an everyday tolerance created by ordinary people on the docks of the global South. And here's the interesting part: how do we even know any of this? This is where the book turns into genuinely fascinating historical detective story, and I became completely obsessed with this part. All of this was found in a literal trash heap, actually, in the heart of old Cairo, in a place called Fustat, stands the Ben Ezra Synagogue. For centuries, the Jewish community here followed a unique tradition. They believed that any piece of paper containing the written name of God could never be destroyed or thrown away. So they placed them in a messy windowless storage room called a Geniza. For over 800 years, millions of documents piled up in that darkness, not just holy scriptures, grocery lists, marriage contracts, legal disputes, private business letters. In the late 19th century, Western scholars discovered this room and carted the documents off to the libraries in Cambridge and Oxford. And there they sat, mostly ignored because mainstream historians were focused only on kings and wars. Until Amitav Ghosh came along, he spent years squinting at microscopic lines of Judeo-Arabic script, tracking down a single tiny footnote about an unnamed Indian slave. Why did this move me so much? Actually, that's the question I should ask myself, and I'm asking, and I have an answer for it because it proves history doesn't have to belong only to the winners. With enough empathy and patience, we can rescue the stories of ordinary people from being erased completely. Rescuing that history is beautiful. But now we have to look at the darker, more uncomfortable half of this book. Ghost leaves the medieval archive and takes us back to the 1980s reality in rural Egypt. He expected to find a shared sense of community as a fellow member of the global south. Instead, he walks straight into a wall. He discovers that the modern world has deeply infected how we see each other. In one painful chapter, Ghosh gets into fierce argument with a village priest. The priest taunts him for being Indian, mocking his culture practices, how cow worship, cremation, and calling them uncivilized. Ghosh tries to defend his culture, but the argument quickly turns into a tragic shouting match. They end up screaming at each other about whose country has better technology, whose army has more advanced tanks, and who has nuclear weapons. I remember reading this section and feeling a deep sense of sadness. Ghosh writes that he realized both of them were speaking through the exact same internalized colonial mindset. They were using the exact language of their colonizers, measuring their human worth entirely by their capacity for scientific destruction. That organic, fluid understanding that existed between Ben Yezu and Boma, it was completely gone. In its place, the modern world left behind two post-colonial subjects arguing over who owns the bigger gun. The modern nation state didn't civilize us, it stripped away our ability to understand each other outside of Western frameworks. So, when did this great fracture actually happen? When did we lose this borderless world? Gauss pinpoints the exact moment the old world died. It was AD 1498. The year Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and armed European fleets sailed into the Indian Oceans for the first time. The European empires brought an entirely new idea to the Indian Ocean that trade required military dominance, that ocean could be owned, and that humans to be divided by race, religion, and national borders. Within decades, the ancient open network of the Indian Ocean was systematically crushed, shared spaces were carved up, passports were issued, and walls went up. We are conditioned to look at the modern borders as symbol of order and progress. But in an antique land, this book forces you to see them for what they actually are: scars. They are physical scars of colonial system that divided us so thoroughly that we forgot we ever knew how to live together without them. I didn't finish this book feeling despair. I finished it feeling a strange sense of hope. Because once you realize our current divided world is actually a pretty recent invention, you understand that it isn't permanent. A different way of being human is entirely possible because it's already happened before. If you ever feel that modern sense of isolation, if you're tired of the shallow division that dominate our lives, pick up in an antique land. It will remind you of who we are before we let borders define our soul. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comment section. Do you think we could ever go back to connecting with each other the way Ben Yezu and Boma did? And if you're new here, consider subscribing. I bring you a new book every week that isn't just meant to be read, but meant to make you think critically. See you in the next one. Have a good day by then.